Welcome to the Gynarchy Podcast. This is your host, Dr. Gynarchy Patel. Here we place women's health and feminism front and center where they belong, engaging in conversations that range from the fundamental to the fearless. With insights from expert guests, we aim to break through the barriers of the patriarchy and envision a new world led by the Gynarchy. So let's get started and dive right in. Welcome to the Gynarchy Podcast. This is your host, Dr. Gynarchy Patel. And today I'm wearing red because we are talking about menstrual rights. And my guest today is Sydney Ramon. She is a national policy coordinator for Period, a global nonprofit committed to eradicating period poverty and menstrual stigma through advocacy, education, and service. With years of experience in public policy and nonprofit leadership, Sydney oversees advocacy campaigns aimed at eliminating the tampon tax, ensuring access to free period products in schools, and advancing menstrual equity legislation nationwide. Sydney is currently pursuing a Master of Public Service and Administration at the Bush School of Government and Public Service, where she focuses on education and social policy. Welcome, Sydney.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to get to talk a little bit about Period and about menstrual equity and the work we get to do.
Great. I'm so happy that you said yes and you're here. So I love to start by asking my guests a little bit about themselves because, I think you're all admirable. You're very admirable. I'd love to hear a little bit about how you came to be doing what you're doing.
Of course. I was originally born and raised in South Texas, right along the Texas-Mexico border. I always show people, Texas on my hand, and I'm all the way down here. I loved where I grew up, a community of such rich culture and safe neighborhoods and all of the great things that make a childhood wonderful. But we also had our significant challenges. We experienced really high poverty rates, low literacy rates, struggled in financial literacy, a lot of housing that wasn't safe or met basic needs. And so from that, I really developed a passion for advocacy that was largely driven by witnessing the need within my own community and wanting to make sure that they had access to the resources they needed, from social basic needs to education to healthcare. And then in 2023, during an advocacy day at the Texas legislature, I got to learn about the proposed sales tax exemption for menstrual products that was actually making its way through the process. And as I learned about it, I then had the opportunity to talk to legislators and share my own experience with menstruation and advocate for the sale exemption bill. And so that was really my formal introduction into the world of menstrual equity. A couple months later, I graduated from Texas A&M University with my bachelor's in political science and a minor in strategic communication. And then just a couple of months later, a little bit less than a year, I had the opportunity to apply to work for Period as the national policy coordinator. And ever since then, I've gotten to serve and work with them in this role with local chapters, coalitions, and policymakers and other partner organizations to help advance this legislation and work to eradicate period poverty in our lifetime.
Thank you. So how long have you been with Period?
I've been with Period for, almost short of a year, a bit short of a year now.
Yeah. Oh, okay. So I would love to hear a little bit more about this sales exemption bill, actually, if you don't mind sharing.
Yeah, definitely. So this was a bill that had gone out many times before in the Texas legislature. And a unique aspect to this legislative body is that they actually meet biennially. So every other year, as opposed to every year, like we see in a lot of state legislatures. There's a joke that they are a part-time legislature, but they do work incredibly hard. And you'll see increased numbers of bills that are being introduced, just sheer volume, upwards of 1,800 bills just on that first day of pre-filing, because they are, working every other year as opposed to that yearly basis. And so this sales exemption bill was on the tampon tax. And so for those who are unfamiliar with the term tampon tax, I know it gets thrown around a lot. And so it might, seem familiar, but we might not know exactly what it means. And so this is the sales tax that's imposed on menstrual products like tampons, pads, menstrual cups, any menstrual devices that help people manage their periods. And so right now, in a lot of states that continue to tax these goods, they're referred to as consumer goods, rather than the essential health products that we view them as. And so this leads to what we call an unfair and discriminatory economic burden on menstruators. And actually, with our partners at Period Law, which is an organization we work very closely, they refer to themselves as the lawyers of the menstrual movement. So they are a lot deeper in these weeds of tax code than we are. But what we do know is that unlike other medical devices and health essentials and necessities that are tax exempt, menstrual products remain taxed in 20 states, despite how essential they are for health and hygiene for those who menstruate. And so in Texas, as this bill had been introduced many times before, and in other states that we've seen this bill being introduced many times before, it made its way through the process and was finally successful in 2023 when Texas eliminated the tampon tax. And then we saw states like South Carolina in 2024 in May soon follow. And since then, we've also seen other states continue to introduce this legislation. We are hopeful in the future that more states would continue to eliminate the tampon tax. And despite what preconceived notions people might have about the bills that go through these legislatures, bipartisan support has truly played a significant role in progress. Even in states as conservative as Texas, we've seen Governor Greg Abbott, who is a strong Republican in the state, speak out in support of this bill. He signed this bill into law. And so we recognize that there is a role and an importance in bipartisanship, and we are seeing it happen. We are seeing this shift.
Yeah, I'm happy to hear that about Texas, because we just see a lot of bad headlines from Texas. And I'm also happy to hear that about Governor Abbott supporting menstrual rights and eliminating the tampon tax. So it is eliminated in Texas.
Yes, it is eliminated in Texas.
And it's one of 20 states, you said? 20 states?
It is only one of 30 states.
30.
But 20 states still continue to tax period products. Yes.
Okay. So there is a lot of work to do.
Yes.
So what are some of the things that you do at Period to help push this forward?
There is a lot that we do at Period on a daily basis, on a yearly basis, both in session and out of session, to really help push these bills forward. We work really closely with a variety of folks at the state and federal level. So that includes lawmakers and their staff, that includes schools, that includes local organizations. We really thrive in collaboration, and we believe that it's crucial to the support of this movement to not only offer our support and our resources to these local activists, but really amplify them and defer to them when it comes to knowing what's best for menstruators in their state. And so when it comes to lawmakers, oftentimes they will seek us out with a bill that they're interested in introducing and seek out our expertise when drafting this legislation on what have been effective strategies and case studies for similar states with similar makeups, populations, political landscapes. And our goal is really to ensure that these policies are effective and actionable and can be properly implemented, because that is an issue that we can often see a bill gets passed and there's no real guidance on how you can implement it. We work closely with schools and with communities. We share menstrual health curriculum that we create both independently and with various partners. And we support schools in that implementation fight that I kind of mentioned, not only of these educational materials, but also of bills for access to product in schools. An example that comes to mind is Oregon Department of Education. We worked with them very closely after the access bill was passed in Oregon to help them develop guidance on implementation for schools on what would be the most effective way for them to provide free menstrual products after the passing of this bill. And of course, local organizations. We cannot do anything without the organizations who are really engaging in this work on the ground. We partner very closely with both grassroots groups, national organizations who are headquartered in these states, and we help them not only in direct service, but of course in these advocacy fights as needed, and of course as graciously as they invite us in. Any opportunity we have to help direct change with them is one we will always take.
Okay, that's great. So it's great to hear you work with schools. One of the reasons I wanted to talk about this topic, of course, is that because menstruation has been in the news, like even the campaign trail And I'm sure you recall during the political news that we've been following in this election year, when Tim Walz was called Tampon Tim. And, he was a very unlikely advocate for menstrual rights, but I'm kind of curious what your dialogue was like, at your organization at that time.
Yeah, we talk a lot about stigma at Period, of course, because we recognize that stigma contributes to silencing these conversations, which contributes to then folks not getting the resources and the help they need when it comes to managing their periods. And so with all of the rhetoric of Tampon Tim throughout this election,
Right.
we were grateful that menstruation was being brought to the front of the culture and talked about in a way that was maybe more open than we're used to. But of course, I would be remiss that as grateful as we are for both the rhetoric of Tampon Tim and, of course, Governor Walz and his leadership in the state, this movement was really built off of hundreds of activists and legislators who have been introducing this bill in the state over a decade. And so I want to really highlight their work because there is such a role for leadership in your state and support of that movement. And of course, so much gratitude that we were able to talk about it on this larger political stage because of Governor Wolf. But I know we work really closely with some amazing people in that state who have been fighting the good fight over these past couple of years. So I did want to shout them out too while we're on the topic of Tampon Tim.
Yes, thank you. So you talk about these local organizations. I mean, I'm aware of period chapters at colleges. Like, are you in other places as well? Like, is it even in high schools and middle schools?
Yeah, we have period chapters all across the world. I believe the last count as of just yesterday might be around 200 chapters, and we are fielding requests from new people every single day who have interest in starting a period chapter. And so we are really grateful for this community that we've been able to build and for the activists who desire to engage with us and be a part of it. We have some in middle schools, in high schools, in colleges. We have community chapters. So sometimes there's no university or school affiliation at all. It is just a group of people who want to make change in their community, young adults, older adults, whatever that community might look like. I know we have a community organizer in Nashville, Tennessee. Her name is Kelsey, and she just started the period chapter that is community based. So she is not a part of any university or specific organization. She just wants to do good work in Nashville. And so that's what she decided to do. But we also work with a lot of different folks. In the state of Pennsylvania, we have independent organizations that we work with, one called The Spot that is really involved in advocacy there and was so instrumental in the Pennsylvania allocation that Governor Shapiro allocated for menstrual products in the state. And so, yes, there are period chapters, which we are so grateful for and we work so closely, but there are also independent organizations all across the globe. And so we're really grateful for them as well.
Yeah, I hope this episode inspires people to, want to take it up in their own neighborhoods or schools. So I am kind of curious about the kinds of initiatives, like getting maybe a little more granular about what you're doing within, say, a school. We certainly heard about putting period products in the bathrooms, but what other types of things are people what kind of changes are they trying to create in their communities and schools besides policy work?
Yeah, definitely. So public policy does play a large role. One of my favorite quotes is, at some point you have to stop pulling people out of the river and go upstream and figure out why they fall in. And so we do the direct service work. We, support communities in their product drives and their period action days and their volunteer work. And we think that is such a crucial part of supporting your communities where they are and ensuring that people have access to the help they need in the immediate. But we recognize that public policy is so crucial to figuring out why people are falling in, to truly eradicating period poverty in our lifetime. And so, yes, it is about access in schools where, the majority of young people who menstruate may be and find community in, but it's also about shelters and prisons and public buildings. And so access extends far beyond schools. And I think we talk very casually. I know when I talk about access, I reference schools all the time because it's the first thing that comes to the forefront of your mind. But public spaces go so far beyond just schools and universities in those states. And so that is what we're seeing. California recently passed a bill that would make menstrual products more accessible for people who are in incarceration facilities, so that when they request these products, they receive those products when they need them and in an amount that is a reasonable amount for them to be able to manage their periods.
Okay, I love that you mentioned public spaces in general. Yes, we as taxpayer fund these places, and we should have access to these products everywhere. So, yes, good point. So, what other types of things contribute to period poverty?
There is a lot.
Yes,
yeah.
I know. Sorry.
Yeah.
We'll just wherever you want to go.
Yeah. I think a crucial part of this is sort of establishing a shared understanding of what period poverty is. Because I know when I came into period, I had what I thought was a good understanding of period poverty. And I'm like, oh, you just don't have access to product. And I think this also is important to note that it extends to limited or inadequate access to both product and menstrual health education. And so this could be due to a variety of things, from financial constraints to that stigma that we're talking about menstruation, that silences these conversations. And so if I'm someone who is going through my menstrual cycle and I'm experiencing extreme pain, and I am told that it is cramps, or I don't feel like I'm in a safe community to be able to have honest conversations about my experience through my menstrual cycle, I may live my entire life with a menstrual disorder that I will not know about until I attempt to conceive, or until it, deeply impacts my quality of life, to which I can no longer be a active member of society and need to seek medical treatment, or it becomes to impact me in a way that is obvious to other people, and that sort of builds that community. And so it's not just an economic issue of I can't afford these products, or there's a tax on these products that is unconstitutional or unfair. It's connected to these larger systemic barriers, including healthcare inequities. So if I do experience my menstrual struggle and I have extreme pain, but I don't have, health insurance, or I'm in a health desert, I'm somewhere like in the Rio Grande Valley where I may not be able to see a doctor, what are my options? And are there resources out there like curriculum or educational programs or organizations like Period or Alliance for Period Supplies or partners that can help me better understand what I'm experiencing? And so while these financial barriers are a significant part of this, while public policy, we believe, is a really great solution to continue to pursue, we recognize that it is very intersectional, and it's largely tied to these broader challenges like healthcare, education, and of course, gender equality.
So, what kinds of things is Period doing regarding the education aspect? I know I'm aware of that you provide some on your website, for example, but you do that in a grassroots way as well locally?
Yes. So we work, once again, everything comes back to policy, but we have worked in several states on both allowing and mandating menstrual health curriculum in school districts and in schools. And the specific grades vary state to state. So I don't want to misspeak or make an overgeneralization on each of those. Some of them, they are 6 to 12. Some of them are 9 to 12. So it really depends on the specific state that you're in. Two that come to mind are, like I said, Virginia and California. They are working right now on developing their curriculum that will be introduced into schools. And so we have people who we work with both as independent community organizers and larger organizations who are actually working with nurses within these independent school districts and within, the larger educational professionals in that state to help develop this curriculum. And that is something that we take an active role in, both through legislation, but yes, on the back end of developing our own independent curriculum to provide guidance to states on these laws and these bills, provide guidance to students on how they can manage these experiences and go through this process. And then we also have a curriculum that's specific to periods in prisons. And so talking about the experience of those who are incarcerated in prison, and advocacy on what change could really look like for those who are incarcerated.
Yeah, I did an episode about sex ed, and it's definitely lacking in many states. And I love that you have a menstrual health curriculum. How many states do you feel like this is kind of a big problem, and what kind of problems have you seen with menstrual health education?
We definitely think it's a problem. We actually had a survey that was released recently, our State of the Period study, and we heard from students that they felt like they knew more about the anatomy of a frog than they did about their own menstrual cycle.
Wow.
And it's true, you're in a biology class and you're dissecting frogs and you're learning about their bodies. And there's so much that you fail to learn about your own because of stigma, because of shame, because of these narratives that are often created about being a person who menstruates, about going through your menstrual cycle. In that same study, we heard that nearly 43% of teens and over 50% of adults wore products longer than recommended. So even at the adult level, there are concerns around education that may stem from a very foundational misunderstanding or lack of information on their menstrual cycle and their products. And so we think that it's really important to increase the education and the awareness and the information that's available to young people, especially during such a crucial time when they maybe first are experiencing their menstrual cycle, when they have a community, when they have support services and systems, potentially in the schools where they're located. And there are so many more stories like this where we hear about, 76% of teens believe that menstrual health should be a part of their core curriculum. 90% of teens think we should normalize menstruation. They are telling us what we need, and it is up to us to listen to them. And so, yes, we personally think that this is an issue, but more importantly, young people think this is an issue.
Yes, I love that. And to your point, as a gynecologist, I have certainly seen how lacking in information young people are. And I do spend a significant amount of my time, reviewing basic things that I think I wish had been covered, elsewhere. So I'm answering or providing very fundamental information, which really everyone should know about: boys, girls, everyone. So that's another thing. I don't think that, I think menstrual health should also be something taught to all people, So, and I love the points you made about healthcare inequities. We definitely see that as well. Healthcare access is limited. Is that a big problem? It must, I get the impression that it's a very big problem in Texas, actually, with the healthcare deserts and lack of insurance, right?
Yeah, I would say so. Obviously, it's difficult to speak to the landscape of the state, but I know personally, being from the Rio Grande Valley, we have a large percentage of people who are minorities. Nearly 90% don't have English as their first language. Like I said, we have high poverty rates with the proximity to the Texas-Mexico border, and so that is considered a healthcare desert. And I know many of my friends who are pursuing their medical degrees have an interest in coming back and really helping to remedy that problem. I know the Texas legislature has invested money. Individuals, private organizations are building hospitals and residency programs where previously there were none. We have an audiologist that was recently hired, and they are the only audiologist south of San Antonio, which is 4 hours away from us. So yes, it is an issue, at least in my community. And I know I've heard similar stories from other people in larger parts of Texas as well.
Yes. And I also appreciated you mentioning the intersectional aspect of this, people with lower socioeconomic status or marginalized communities or LGBTQ plus community members are also going to struggle more. And the other problem with not having access to healthcare is you can delay diagnosis. Like painful periods can be associated with endometriosis or fibroids or other serious health conditions. And these may not be discovered for years, and it can really interfere with education and work, right? So let me see. Is there any place in the world where they're doing this right? I know we're not so great here. We have a lot of work to do. Are there any examples internationally? I get the sense from every episode I do that there are developed countries who are really way ahead of us.
Yes, we are seeing that on the menstrual equity side. What comes to mind is Scotland, I think, is a great example of a place that is doing it right. They actually became the first country to make period products free for all in 2021.
Wow.
So they had an act that actually passed that would ensure that tampons, pads, and other ways that people manage their period are actually accessible to anyone who needs them. So it's no forms, no questions. And in their words, no forms, no questions, just dignity is how they presented it. And so this focuses on really what we talk about, normalizing menstruation, reducing stigma, making products visible and easily accessible for folks. And so, yes, your instinct is correct. There are people internationally like Scotland who are taking this approach to ending period poverty.
That's amazing. So just every public place has period products available. And I assume people are still buying products of different grade, they don't pay taxes on them. Okay, amazing. So it's nice to have a model to follow. Yeah. You know what? I guess I want to hear about, I want to hear about some of your successes, period. I mean, you mentioned some policy successes, but what were some of your most impactful campaigns?
Ooh, that is a great question. I would say more broadly, I did want to talk a little bit about our Period Action Day. So this is an annual day of advocacy to celebrate and advance the menstrual movement. Period has hosted this day since 2018. So it's been quite a few years of our annual Period Action Day, and we work with partners and organizations truly across the globe. This year, we directly supported either financially or through the supportive resources and shirts and merch and all those things, upwards of 64 Period Action Day events across the globe. And so we had some that were happening in Canada, we had some that were happening in Africa and India. And so we are really grateful that we're able to host a day that really connects the menstrual movement in this way. And outside of just the ones that we were able to directly and responsibly support and host, we also saw hundreds that we were being tagged in across the world. And so that was really exciting to be able to see so many activists come together in support of the menstrual movement. This includes individuals and advocates, but also legislators. I know I had the opportunity to spend Period Action Day in DC and then in North Carolina, speaking with legislators and elected officials, both at the state and federal level, about the importance of menstrual equity. And so that is a really tangible way that we're able to make an impact and see just how much this movement has grown beyond period and beyond the impact that we're able to make. We saw people hosting action days that didn't even know what period was. And so that was really rewarding to just have an understanding that there are so many advocates out there that are doing this work. And so that's one campaign that I'm particularly proud to be a part of and that we've really seen growth come out of over these past years that we've hosted it.
So what day was it? And is it the same day every year? How can people get involved?
Yes, it is on the second Saturday of every October. Every October. And we have a website, periodactionday.com, that you can go to. It is not yet updated for our next year's Period Action Day, but you'll be able to see all of the events that were hosted, all of the resources that we offer. We really want to make sure that this is accessible. And so if you are interested in hosting a Period Action Day event for next year, or a product drive or a donation drive or anything until then, please feel free to reach out to us and we would love to see how we could support you.
Okay, great. So what other types of things can people do in their own communities, you think? So yeah, I thought your website was a great resource, by the way. A lot of information there, like a lot of the free information handouts that you could even print off. And I didn't get to check out the newsletter yet, but that looks cool. I love the name, The Rag, right?
Yes.
Great name. But yes, what other things can people do locally, you think, to support?
Yeah, there is so much to be done. And I love this question because I really believe that service can be big or it can be small. And that definition is entirely up to you. I know we had high school students who hosted a movie of Turning Red, that Disney movie about that young girl. And so it was really nice. And it was, a group of 8 or 10 of them, and they talked about their menstrual cycles and created a community around just the showing of this movie at a local theater that they were at. And so you can make a difference in a million different ways by educating others about menstrual equity and creating a community that is safe for you all to share and to educate and to break this stigma. You could organize donation drives or product packing parties where people bring in menstrual products and you repackage them for donation at a local shelter, a place that might need menstrual products. We've seen period chapters and organizations actually create lunch bags, like in a brown brown lunch bag that they pack with period products for students over break. So if you are someone who doesn't have access to menstrual products over the Christmas break or the summer break, they actually take in these products, repackage them, and give them to students who might not have product otherwise. And of course, advocacy. That's a great way. Advocacy doesn't just have to happen at the federal level, doesn't just have to happen at the state level. There are changes that you can make, pushing your administration in your school or your school district to increase access to products, advocating for local change of your local sales tax exemptions. There are so many things you can do. Even volunteering with the period chapter, attending those meetings on a weekly or monthly basis or whenever they host or whenever they're hosted. Those are all really great and meaningful ways to get involved.
I really love those ideas. That's so creative. Yeah, I love what you mentioned about just creating a dialogue and getting women together or girls together to talk about their periods, because I do think that, well, I was raised in a generation where it was a source of embarrassment to talk about your period. And that kind of reminds me of like just menstrual discrimination in general. Another thing, another aspect of my culture, I was raised Hindu, and during your period weeks, you're not really allowed in temple or to, participate in religious services. And this is why I am anti-theist, I guess you would say. I think religion can play a wonderful role in bringing people together and their families together, but I don't think that we should follow it the way we do, in ways that can discriminate against people who menstruate. So do you play any role in educating around that, menstrual discrimination?
Yes, actually, in North Carolina, the event that I attended was a South Asian menstrual equity dialogue. And it was from people of all different cultures of South Asian descent who talked about exactly what you are sharing now. And it was one of the first times that I'd been in a room of people who had experienced so much menstrual discrimination. And I'd obviously heard about it and I've, had these conversations, but it was truly a community of people who were bonding and sharing over these experiences that they've had through their culture, through their experience, through their religion. And they have plans to continue that as a yearly event for South Asian people who menstruate and to just continue these dialogues and these conversations. And I think their next step was to create some sort of space in North Carolina that is dedicated to this menstrual discrimination and creating resources for people to be able to seek out who have experienced that or have a desire to talk about and be in community. So yeah, yes.
That's great to hear. Exactly. I want more women to just talk about this openly, about things like this. And it's not just our, South Asian culture or Hindu culture. It's a lot of religions have this notion of, or plant this notion of uncleanliness and, create a sense of embarrassment and shame around menstruation. In some parts of the world, you're even isolated isolated from your family, in menstruation huts, So, and some girls have suffered and even died in these huts, which sometimes lack heat and electricity and things like that. So it's actually very serious. And in some places, the level of discrimination. So I think I would love to have more conversations about this. And I would love for it to cross cultures too, So let's see. I also think, I guess I want to get your thoughts on something controversial about the, placing period products in men's bathrooms.
Yeah,
that's something people love to fight about, which I think is quite silly.
Definitely. And obviously this is
boys or men's bathrooms. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah.
Yeah. This is definitely something that was brought to the forefront through, the tampon tin dialogue that we heard a lot throughout this election. And it goes back to the intersectionality that contributes to menstrual equity. And so when we talk about intersection, sometimes people think low-income menstruators and the choice between buying food and menstrual products. And that is an important aspect, of course. But there's also an additional layer of gender nonconforming individuals who menstruate, who often face compounded stigma and access barriers to product. And so if you are a young person in a community who is menstruating, who is gender non-conforming, and you find yourself in a men's bathroom where there are no access to products, that is also an inequity. That is also something that's impeding your ability to menstruate with dignity, which is crucial for us at Period, and a really core belief that we have, that people should have the ability to menstruate and manage their period with dignity. And so there's so much intersectionality there. And for me, that is why it makes sense. And there are a lot of states where it is in 51% of bathrooms, right? So trying to continue to expand access to product where they may not be any. It's also important to note that, yes, not all young people who find themselves using men's bathrooms or boys' bathrooms need product or menstruate, but they may have family members or siblings or mothers who are experiencing period poverty who don't have access to product. And that may also be an avenue in supporting families and women and people who menstruate outside of the school system, where is currently where we're seeing the most support, right? And so if you're in a state where you have access to products in schools, but there are no access to product in public places, that is also an entryway to help support families who need those products as well.
That's a great point. And I agree with you. I think it's a definite feature of the patriarchy to kind of reinforce these very gendered stereotypes about, and they very much want to tell people who they are, what they should be, how you should behave, what you should do, restricting our freedoms, basically, and I think that exactly we should fight against that and fight gender stereotypes. So I also think like the stigma, like work, I think it extends in adulthood. It's beyond boys and girls in school bathrooms, right? I think this also happens in adulthood at, in workplaces, where women are kind of embarrassed to reveal that they are having their period or having a rough day or need time off. So the more we normalize it, the better, right? And normalize it from a young age and just make it a mission in our society to just talk freely about periods and the associated issues. So any other thoughts before I go to audience questions?
I did just want to mention that you mentioned workplaces. We at Period have a corporate advisory board, and we work really closely on something we call period positive workplace certifications. And so these are actually organizations and businesses that provide free products in bathrooms that meet bathroom facility standards. And so that's, well ventilated, safe areas, hand washing facilities, places where people can manage their periods with dignity, and also making sure their employees are aware. So informing them through a formal notice that period products can and will be provided to them. And so that's something we're really passionate about, that our team works on, and that we invite businesses to come into, and, happy to support you in that process if that's something you're interested in doing as well.
Oh my gosh, I love that. I was not aware of that. And I do think, we tend to think of, organizations like this as being a young person's thing and around schools, right? But I love that you have this aspect, because I do think, workplaces need to be more mindful about issues like this. So thank you. That's great. Okay, so let me see. Yeah, we're winding down. So let me make sure I covered all our questions. Yes. Okay, so here is a question from Jill Beck. Don't know if this is exactly topical, but I have a client who is white and her daughter is mixed race. Given that Black women have heightened risk factors during pregnancy, does that carry over into menstrual cycle issues? Do Black girls, women have a tougher time during their cycle than others? The mom wants to be on top of this as her daughter goes through puberty. Hopefully this question makes sense. So I have thoughts, but I'd love to hear your thoughts. I mean, sounds a little more medical, so I'm happy to take it if you're not comfortable.
Yeah, I am unfortunately not as familiar with the medical side of these questions or how it works. So I will defer to the doctor in the room.
Yes. Okay, thank you. I didn't know if you wanted to mention any, I don't know. You seem, very bright and very knowledgeable. So I thought, okay. But okay. So regarding Black girls and women, it is pretty well known that they can have heavier periods, more painful periods. There's a higher risk fibroids later in life. And so that is something important to know. I mean, other things we know, depending on someone's socioeconomic status, um, social situation, they may not have access to period supplies, they may not have access to healthcare. I mean, I think the important thing to know if for your daughter is to be mindful about period related issues, and such as pain or heavy periods. A lot of young people can have anemia as well. So I would say, have a low threshold to seek gynecology help. And I think sometimes young people are afraid to go to the gynecologist because they think you're going to have the whole deal with pelvic exam and pap smear, but we actually defer a lot of that. Sometimes you're just meeting and chatting and educating. And sometimes we do tests that don't require exams at all. I tend to try to defer exams until necessary. PAPs don't start until 21. So there's a lot we can do to help a young person with their periods without being very invasive. So I'd say just be an advocate for your child. And yeah, that's it. I hope that answers their question. Okay, second question from someone who wrote, someone named Andrada Pop. I guess it's not a question. It's just a comment. I want a free period day. So so do we. Yes. I'm thinking that means like time off with your period, right? If it's severe. What are your thoughts? Do you ever hear this?
Yeah, that would be my interpretation as well of a free period day. What we are seeing in national trends of legislation being introduced, and what we've seen most recently in pre-filing in Texas, as a bill that would allow for an excused absence for those who experience menstrual disorders. And so there are rules and laws and regulations that do allow for doctors' excuses and medical excuses. But going back to stigma and the shame around these conversations, and sometimes a lack of acknowledgement of the severity of the pain that women can experience in people who menstruate throughout their cycle, and the impact that can have on their ability to go through life and be a productive member of the communities that they're a part of. I think this does a really great job to not just give a free period day, but also, expand these conversations and dialogue and break down some of the shame to help larger conversations about the recognition of menstrual products as a medical necessity, of, your menstrual cycle as a medical experience that you are having and such complications that can come with it. So yes, we want a free period day too, and legislators are working to make that happen.
Yes. And you know what? That reminded me, we should get paid leave. Women should have paid leave for severe menstrual symptoms, or disorders. So, okay. So let's see. Sydney, can you share what's going on at Period, or in your life? What's next for you?
Yeah, we are gearing up for a session. In some states, legislative session has already begun or it's just wrapping up, but all legislative sessions, even those that are meeting biannually like Texas, will be in session come January. And so we are just really excited to witness all of the bills that are right now being pre-filed. We are tracking those. We're meeting with legislators and their staff and organizers and our partner organizations to just gear up for what's ahead. We are hoping that there will be more bills introduced this session than we saw last session. And we feel very confident that that will be the case as legislators continue to reach out and activate even individuals and organizations and in states where we didn't realize what a large presence we had there or the interest that was available. I know I heard from a senator in a state where they had not previously engaged on this issue, but read about a bill that was being pre-filed and said, hey, I want to file something like that. And so it's just really exciting to see all of this movement and this energy. We also have a national coalition to end period poverty that was recently started that Period has the opportunity to sit on the steering committee for. And so looking at bills like the Good Samaritan law that was introduced by Congresswoman Grace Meng to help increase access to menstrual products federally, or a bill introduced by Congressman Al Green to eliminate the tampon tax federally. All of those things are, things that we're seeing happening at the federal level that we'll continue to work on and advocate for and activate with in this upcoming year. So yes, just looking ahead and really hopeful about the change that we'll be able to make through this next session.
Thank you so much for your good work. And I look forward to following what else you do, where you go. Please share your website and any social media handles where you'd like people to follow you, either personally or both, personally and also Period.org.
Of course. You can follow Period on all social media platforms, Period Movement. And you can also find our website, period.org, that has all of these wonderful resources. And it also has a link for you to sign up for our advocacy updates newsletter. And so you just put your email in, and whenever there's a call to action or active legislation or other opportunities for you to serve and volunteer in your community, you will receive an email for the state that you decide to click on that box and associate with. And that's something that we do through that website. Personally, you can contact me at sydney@period.org or our whole policy team at policy@period.org. And feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn using my name here, Sydney Ramon. If you're at all interested in talking more, if you want to get into the movement, if there's work you're doing you want to share, I would absolutely love to hear from you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Sydney. So, okay, I always leave my audience with a closing thought, so I'm going to do that. The patriarchy is a system that prioritizes men's power. And as such, it's no surprise that they create shame around menstruation and create an environment that disadvantages people who have periods through neglect and financial burden. But in the Gynarchy, we recognize that menstruation is a normal, healthy body function, and we work to build a world where we can speak of it freely, educate each other about it without shame, and support people who menstruate so they can menstruate with dignity and without suffering undue burden. So down with the patriarchy and up with the Gynarchy. Thank you so much, Sydney. You have a great day.
Yes, thank you so much.
Did you enjoy this episode of the Gynarchy Podcast? Know someone else who might enjoy this conversation? Make sure to subscribe and share the show with your friends and family. Find us on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, and just about anywhere you find podcasts. On social media, we can be found on Blue Sky, Instagram, and TikTok at The Gynarchy. Thank you so much for listening.